can chew on. All right, let's assume that it started. This is the Sunday afternoon, and the funny part is that everybody on this call is in either Thailand or Malaysia, and it's afternoon. Uh, and so, uh, welcome for this time of day. And Matt had a question. Go ahead and restart your question, Matt.
I don't know if it was a question, maybe more of an observation or statement. It's that
Okay.
in my life, when I first got into Buddhism, I saw that it was obvious that I needed to separate myself from people who had a tendency to think unwholesome thoughts and engage in unwholesome behaviors, which led me to be in isolation. And now I'm thinking that I need to put more effort into finding people who are the opposite, who are more wholesome and have more wholesome behaviors and thoughts, so that I can improve myself. Because it seems like if I'm by myself, I tend to just do what I did in the past,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to becoming better.
All right. Now, without going too much further than that, what we can say is that many people see that beginning part and try various opportunities of getting out of it. All right. Some people will, in fact, think that if they get a whole bunch of money, they can leave that civilization, go buy my own island or something like that, and retreat from the world. And so they plot and scheme to rob Fort Knox or something like that. Um, uh, well, dream big if you're going to fail anyway. So Uh, if you recognize then that that is a very common thing, it is actually easy enough wisdom to come across. It's in fact possibly the beginning of the spiritual journey is to wake up and say, "What a crap! This is all about your crap." And then the next stage would be withdrawal from that once we wake up to it. That in fact, that's almost a microcosm of the entire teaching of the Buddha in the sense of the two-step process of knowledge and vision and seeing what's going on and deliverance from it by dropping it, getting rid of it, throwing it out. That's in fact the process that we're working with Anapanasati that got you to the state that you could see how big that pile of crap actually was.
Yeah.
And it's all over the place, and everybody else has got that same kind of, uh, to be generous, we could say false wiring. Not the kind of wiring that's into the DNA completely, where we have no control over it, but rather the wiring of all of the rules and the way that things are supposed to, the standards. It's sort of like this. How does an electrician wire a house? He wires that house according to the plan that he was given. He was told how to wire that house by the regulations and the laws. Okay. So that's how we wire our own brain is around the regulations that we learned in childhood. Don't go there. Don't say this. You're not big enough to do that. Ouch, that hurts. And so we learn this whole life plan. And when we begin to wake up to that and recognize that it manifests itself in the form of unwholesome thoughts. And as we begin to see the unwholesome thoughts and start cleaning that stuff out, we begin to see the whole world in a brand new way. Before we saw it through the same colored rose glasses that, and when we take those glasses off, we see that everybody's wearing those same colored rose glasses. And we want away from it. We want out of here. Because actually, part of that education is and this is where a majority of the people get stuck in when they see how bad things are, they want to go fix it. They see society's troubles and they go on sometimes on a rampage to get it fixed. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a clear example of that. She's just a little deluded about what she hates. So, hello, Pedro. And this is a stopping point for many, many people. You could call these the zealots, the ones who see what a pile of crap that civilization has become. And I guess you could say, in a kind of a big intellectual, conceptualized way, this is the fight or flight syndrome that we have when primitively we would confront or compound some predator or some enemy. And so that's how we would behave naturally due to our genetics. Those are the two big choices that we'd make once we see the danger. The trick is are you going to get stuck in fight because you're going to lose that one, or flight, and that's the next step, but it's got its limits too. And so then the next logical stage is to not just flee, but to find better places to flee to. And that's part of the reason why, especially in the time of the Beatles, you had a mass input of immigrants into India, camping in Nepal, checking out Sri Lanka. I was on that kind of party group trip myself for years. And that they were all seeking something. This isn't, in fact, what the Southern Baptists call a calling, a yearning to go someplace else and get out of here. Let's go to Africa and save all of the natives. and so this is a widespread held fight or flight mechanism that we go through. But then some wisdom starts to pop in there, and so the frontal cortex starts to come into play there. Hopefully, because the other possibility is whatever rules we're supposed to keep, like, oh, I couldn't possibly go do that. I couldn't go and fight, and I couldn't go away, so now I'm stuck with it. Poor me. All right. And so there's all of these possibilities that we go through at a natural place. But eventually, we come up to the point of recognizing that there is a way out of this, because I can find people who have found their way out of this. And that they stay kind of out of it for most of the time. And whether they're in it a little bit of the time is not important. The point is that that's the way that everybody's intending to live, is living like you're the king of the world, on top of the world. Because why? What's your other choices? Either be buried under your own pile of world, or clawing your way out of it, trying to get to the top of it, or being on top of your own world. And when you recognize that others have actually gone to the top of their own world and they can manage that pretty well, and start, those are the kind of people that are worthy of association. This is, in fact, there's a key word in there. And that is worthy of respect. Friends that you're going to go and live with because they're worthy of your time. They're worthy of your attention. They're worthy of your generosity, Matt. And when we recognize that they're worthy of respect and generosity, then that's what builds Sangha, because they're practicing those same things so that they can see you guys as worthy also, worthy of their respect. worthy of their honor, that we feel honored to be friends with one another because we're finding some good people to associate with. And here, those that are planning on that and working on that and growing it, here they are off into places like these achans that they're finding that Daniel has located. There are so many really high quality, excellent meditation and Dhamma teachers all over Thailand. They're so prolific. There's thousands of them, but the Westerners seem that they are not um, in existence because they don't know about them. They're not within my world, therefore they're not in any world. Yes, Matt, go ahead.
You just answered basically what I was going to ask, but it seems to me that a lot of people don't actually believe these people exist. And I know some people who think that you're the only one, for example.
Well, guess who my teachers were?
Other people, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, and that's one of the points that's really good as an example when you're sussing someone out. How do they approach their lineage? Where does this stuff come from? If they saying they dreamt it up on their own, that's suspicious because this stuff is so rare and so hard to figure out that it takes a Buddha or two now and then to be able to figure out that all you have to do is see what the problem is and then set it down. That's too much for most humanity to figure out. And so we want to see I couldn't have figured it out without Bhikkhu Buddhadasa's instructions and theoretical backgrounds and understanding all of the stuff from that point of view, and then getting kicked in the butt and slapped in the face and having to walk on hard rocks and learn to coordinate my hands and learn to have great big bumblebees an inch long crawl across my head while I'm standing and talking to Achan Po. Actually, it was the other way around. I was watching him having a great big wasp crawl across his head while we were talking together. That was an instructional point for him. And that's the kind of thing that the lineage has that we can do something with on the internet. But another point is that Achan Po and Bhikkhu Buddhadasa were not my only teachers at Wat Suan Mok. All of the monks were teachers of each other. And they were all good friends with each other, joking and laughing and pointing things out and all of that kind of stuff, okay? And the Thais are better at it, and the Westerners get uptight. And so, in fact, one of the qualities of that, or an example of that, is imagine that you've got 4 or 5 teenagers that are, let us say, crossing through traffic and going on whatever normal road that there is, and that one of them misses his step and slips and falls. Now, in the West, they'll turn around, they'll wait on him, maybe they'll ask, does he need help? Especially if there's women there, they'll go and help him and whatnot like this. In Thailand, if that happens, everybody's going to laugh, including the guy who slipped and fell, because it's no big deal. And nobody comes to help anybody. They're teasing him like almost hazing, like at a school for kids, except that the hazing has already been done, and now this is the afterglow of the hazing. And we got you, okay, and get up and let's go. And so that kind of mentality then is quite instructional because we will allow it. Basically, that spoonful of sugar. Let's put some humor in life, because then life's lessons are a whole lot easier to swallow. And it's really, really good to be around people who are willing to spoon feed you life's lessons with a smile. And that's why we want to associate with the wise. And that's the next step along the way. This is what most of them would talk about Um, Even if they don't say it in that language, this is the desire to ordain, which is also wrapped up with being able to get away from it all in that worldly sense. But where we're going is at least worthwhile going. That, in fact, when I was first at Wat Suan I felt like the place was a nature park. I felt like let us say, a young Indian brave running through the jungle. That was the kind of feeling that I had there. It was a huge, huge forest, and I very much loved the place for that. So this whole idea of being able to fall in love with the place that you're in and the people that you're around and feeling like you're at home is something that most Westerners kind of lose by the time they're wearing long pants. And that's something that I was able to rediscover at Wat Suan Mok. But I did that after I had ordained. The question is, can me, by telling this story, help each and every student who listens to this tape be able to see that for themselves and recognize that, yes, there is value in knowing that there are ways and places to where you can actually come home in a way to relax, that you're finally at home and there's no place else to go. That's really an amazing kind of feeling that you've kind of arrived at where you want to go. That you don't want to go anyplace else. You've already been around the world a couple of times or three or four, stopped along many, many places and many cultures. So, what's the point of traveling on? It's just okay to be where you are, but you gotta kind of get to the state of loving wherever you are. And finding a place like that for you guys in Thailand is really possible. If you look around, you can find something. Find some noble Thai people. Find some noble. I mean, they don't even have to live in the Wat to be very generous and kind and excellent, high quality people. That's the neighborhood that I live in, by the way. Is my um, first off, um, the actual landlord, Mr. Arson, is actually the head layman at one of the biggest Wats in the island, which backdoors to his property. It's only like a minute or so walk. And that he keeps track of all of the equipment that they use whenever they bring out all of their party equipment or funeral stuff or all of that. He's got all of that stuff squirreled away in the garage right across the street here. So this is the kind of community that I'm in with his family, and that they've got four or five houses around, but they're constantly bringing food and bananas and fish that have been caught and all kinds of things to share. And so Tam makes sure that they do that too. It's a community kind of way of living. That about half the time, we will arrange for the transportation for the kids, and then the other half of the time, the other family will. And so we get the kids back and forth. Uh, yeah, we have two kids on a motorbike, is basically what it is, along with the driver. Um, but everything is really shared, and that's one of the qualities that I like. If we go build a house, all of that's got to start over again. But here we are. I feel like I've reestablished that kind of family that I was found at Wat Suan Mok. I can recreate that now that I know what it is that we need. And that what is that? Family, friends, people. Um, and so that's the point then of seeking out good people, nobles. Watts are full of those kind of people, good to associate with. In fact, the ideal situation that many people kind of note, and sometimes this is an important point, is look at who lives in the houses that are close by the Wat. And then think back historically why that would happen. And then you can recognize in Fremont, California, they've got a huge Thai Wat there But much of the property in the vicinity of that are owned by Thai people who now have the Wat right across the street. It's a way of saying it. That's very Jewish of them, because that's the way, the Jewish tradition is. You've got to walk to the synagogue. So if they build a synagogue, everybody in the Jewish community is going to go build their houses around that. So that's the way that it is here in Thailand. And that we can establish that also in the sense of the Westerners can become, because there's 4,000 or 5,000 Westerners on this island, no community at all. Nobody knows anybody, unless you typically hang out at the same bar. And so that whole idea, I'm going on too long about finding noble friends and staying with them is much, much superior to just merely retreating. It is not so much of getting out of the situation, it's more of, yeah, but where are you going to go? Okay, and then the next one, which is the big step 3 that we were talking about, and right at the very beginning of the conversation, was that what are you going to do once you have gotten that noble, worthy mindset straightened out for yourself? Who you have 24 hours a day, what kind of entertainment do you want? And I mean, if you have, in the first place, lived with the knowledge for a while that the whole world is nothing but a soap opera, well, now we can go watch the soap opera. That part of the tradition that I have seen is that in the village, the boys in the village, they know about the village Wat, including all of the old uncles that are there and that kind of stuff. And they go there, they know the place. And so when they're able to, or ready, let us say, old enough to ordain, they ordain in that Wat amongst their old uncles and their family and everything else. And after the young monk is well trained for a few months or a year, then he's sent to the forest Wat, where the real training goes on. And that's the distinction, very strong distinction, but the Westerners don't understand it until it's really strongly pointed out. That, but once he's in that forest Wat, that's then the seclusion. He's away from the world. And that's where the training is done, so that he can get that world out of the system and come back to a peace at home, at harmony, and everything is, in Thailand, they have the word sabai, sabai. The way that they say it is relaxing. Just sabai, sabai. Okay, so this is the way that we're going to be living our life for a while, out in the forest or the wilderness or at home or in an empty hut or whatever like that, having close friends by, getting the all mind straightened out. And then the mind is worthy. It's come up to a point, maybe not 100% of the time, but certainly more than 90% of the time, and certainly not down there at the 30 to 20% that it normally is for people of getting their mind in working. In fact, there's an old story from the 1950s that the human mind is so sharp, but most people only use 10% of it. Have you heard about that? Well, one of the ways of restating that is because, of course, that's completely wrong. If they understood the whole point about what the amygdala does and what the cortex does, which one, and the cerebellum and all of the functions of all of that stuff in the brain, then they'll not say that, because that doesn't make any sense. But what we can say is that people are, yeah, they use the whole brain all the time. They're just pointing it in the wrong direction about 90% of the time. Really, really bad shots, us human beings. Or another way of saying it, that we're only thinking about 10% of the time, and the rest of the time we're on kind of automatic pilot. And so the whole practice then is taking that range from about 10, 20% at best. And by the way, those who engage in certain activities and certain sports and that kind of stuff actually develop a sensory awareness that will put them up 20, 30%. You know, like samurai swordsmen and batters and some football players and all kinds of other sports really train the mind. Boxers, for instance, if you start thinking about the argument you had with your grandma, you probably have a face full of fists immediately after because you're not watching what's going on. So there are many, many things that will train us to look at what we're doing, to start watching being awake. And we can take that sati, and start putting it to good use. Now, even in the Mahasi method, they have the idea of wake up and take a look at what you're doing. But really, the whole third point is not only to wake up and take a look at what you're doing, but make a change, which is that very cleaning out of the mind that needs to be done. Waking up and see what a mess it is in there is not so much fun for so long. May put some Americans into a dark night or something like that. So let's say that the reason that we're going to actually go out into the woods and get away from it all is to actually learn to figure out that we are actually in a paradise. Why don't we enjoy it as such and stop frowning and farting around about all the stuff that we brought with us? Just let it go. Set it down. Forget about it. And that, by the way, one of the thoughts that I will have as soon as that kind of stuff comes up, because it is, I mean, it's past, the mind is open and free, and up pops something. And then I'll look at that and I'll say, well, I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. And then set it back down. I can look at that old house in North Carolina, and then, I mean, just an image of it flashes by. And then I can say, wow, I don't have to take care of that old house anymore, and set it down. Or wow, I don't have to cut grass anymore, and set it down. Whatever it was in the past that I was doing that I didn't like, especially the things about myself that I didn't like, is, oh, never mind, set it down. And that's the way that we clean it, one little thing at a time. And so to continue on with that, we can begin to understand that one of the mistakes that Westerners make is actually more of an issue of Hinduism, and a lot of Westerners mix Hinduism with Buddhism. And that is the issue around anatta, in the sense of that there is an atmos that is out there. This is the big God, or the big I, or the big self that Maharishi, Ramayana Maharishi, when I read his article, because somebody mentioned him recently, and saw that, oh, this is a curious mixture of primitive Hinduism and Buddhism, but it's said in a Hinduistic way. And one of the things that the Buddha was talking about is this atmos, like the atmosphere that we're in, this big, beautiful world, this wide paradise that we're in, is actually my interpretation of me, that I and nature are one, that I am the God here. This is the whole idea of it, except that we still stay in that part of feeling insignificant about it. Now, what the Buddha says instead is that atmos is not alive. It's not aware. It's not conscious. And it's not here to rub your belly. It's here because of situations and circumstances, and we were born into that situation and circumstances. And if we can learn to get along in that situation and circumstances without rebelling and resisting and wanting it to be different and being confused about it because we see danger, danger everywhere, and recognize, in fact, we are at home, there's nothing dangerous. We can relax. Everything's okay. There's no place to go. We live in a paradise. And we can clean the mind out like that. And when we get to it in that way, now the monk in the forest is kind of ready to go back to the city what? And be one of the old uncles. So that now he can come and listen to all the tragedies of the world that the old relatives and village people bring to him. And he says, there's nothing to it. And let them figure out that there's nothing to it. Their argument is just situational, doesn't matter. And this is part of the way that the Thai system works, is that the elderly monks, after they've gotten the training of having no place to go and nothing to do and feeling completely at home, they then want to let that rub off as best they can to the people in the village. And so eventually the whole civilization of Thailand winds up being at a higher level. That's one of the reasons I love it here so much, is because the average Thai person is much more awake than your average Westerner. I see you nodding your head, David. Okay, and so with that, because of the language barrier, we misjudge them. Everybody thinks that anybody who doesn't understand what I'm saying must be an idiot. And it's basically the other way around. Everything that's said around me that I don't understand makes me the idiot. Except when you recognize that language don't matter anyway. That it's the comfort and feeling of security that we're really looking for, not correct interpretation of the language. And now we're back into that step 3 again of being able to spread the joy that we have gotten in seclusion. Now, in this frame of reference that I've been speaking about it, is sort of a lifetime kind of thing, starting at 20, staying in the Wat for 5 years, and then spending 20 or 30 years in the forest, and then coming back as an elderly old man and just sitting there and being happy with his family, while the family sit there with him and being happy. That actually now can be said, well, it doesn't have to be like that. That can be compressed, chopped up, made into a fruit salad, and practiced, because we're living our lives in such that our life itself is already chopped up. Sometimes it's chopped up by airplanes, sometimes it's chopped up by jobs, and chopped up by mommy and daddy, and chopped up by my desires and whatever like that. And so we can recognize, okay, with our time chopped up, that still means that we can still practice all 3 phases of recognizing what a Upanishad is, wanting to get out of it, actually getting out of it, then getting it out of you, and then coming back and dealing with it again happily. That in fact, one of the ways to say it is that with all the ills of the world, with all the greed, all of the really big lies and stupidity and ignorance of those political parties, and all the ill will and hatred and racial violence and all of that kind of stuff is what we would define as the world, except that's just my own attitude. That's not a real world. That's my concept. And I can say it any way that I want to, but that's the way that I see the world, so that's the world to me. Until I change my attitude and say, wait a minute, that's the world that I constructed because I've been watching too much of Fox News or something. And so these are not really my thoughts about the world. That there's other ways to think about the world, and we can think about the world the way that we want to think about the world. The world is not really that ugly. In fact, most of the people that I know they're okay people. They're struggling along. Almost all of them have the same problems that I've got. I just don't sling them around in everybody's face as everybody else. But we're all the same. that we're not better than one another, that in fact that's the part of the atmos, that we're all part of the atmosphere. We all breathe the same air. We all have the same junk thoughts that we were taught by the same parents. And we're all in it together. So why can't we just teach each other to enjoy it? Because you're not going to be able to fix it. But you can play with it. It's a playground of sorts. So it's an attitude about the world that eventually has to change so that we recognize that it's not so bad. The whole world is my home if I see it that way. Even getting on a crowded bus and fighting for the seat, I still feel at home. Actually, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to get on a bus because I know that I won't feel at home when I'm on that bus that's so crowded. And guess what? The best part is I don't have any place to go. Bus rides not necessary. So if we start to use our wisdom to shut the doors to the things that we know that we should not go in because therein lies our own boogeyman and dangers and whatnot like that. An example of that is that very few people have played with snakes. I happen to, because of some of the past that I've had to deal with them on several different places and levels and whatnot like that. And so I'm not afraid of the snakes around here at all. But guess what? Thai people aren't either. But the average Westerner, if they got confronted with as many snakes as we do on a regular basis, they'll start killing them. Mm-hmm. Why? Instinctively, it's because they're afraid. It's not necessarily the culture. It's not the culture that tells them to kill snakes. It's the culture that tells them to be afraid of snakes. And so that fear can be directed culturally, or we can be afraid of snakes out in the wilderness, and so we have to start dealing with some of them out there. There was, in fact, one episode that it was one of these bright yellow pythons, and this was a big guy, and he was rolled up, rainy night, and I was walking along a pathway next to a really, really high hill that was actually constructed by humans putting rocks in place to get this retaining wall so that they put a kuti up there on the side of the hill. And in the crash of the night, here just rolling down this thunder, was a big thunderous thing. And when I got close to it, I recognized that it was a big python. And he wasn't having a good day. And so I left him. And the next day I told Achan Po about it, and he says, "Did you tell anybody?" And I says, "No, you're the only one." And he says, "Good, because if it gets out, the lay people will come and eat him. Rather than just kill him or capture him, because, in Florida, they want to get rid of the pythons there. If those pythons that are there in Florida were in Thailand, or maybe it was the Thai people who were in Florida, they wouldn't have a python problem." All right, so here's all of this stuff about culture, and we recognize that, oh, wait a minute, this is a big, wide, wonderful world we live in, and it's always our own narrow mind from our own position that we think the whole world is like that. That we actually create the world that we live in through our concepts and our ideas and whatnot like that. This is the revolutionary understanding that we come to, is that, in fact, all of the dukkha that we ever had and ever will have, we're manufacturing it on the spot by our attitudes and our feelings and our thoughts. And we can do better than this. And so that's the cleaning out process. And pretty soon, you don't have to deal so much with all those unwholesome thoughts, because every time that you make the mistake, you correct the mistake right then and there. That's how, in fact, a good musician learns music. Is that as soon as he makes a mistake, he backs up and he plays it again and plays it again and plays through it on. And so this is kind of what we do with Anapanasati, is as soon as you can catch that mistake, hey, man, I saw that. That's not who I am. We can let that go. Throw that out. It's not who I am. Or back to, I'm glad I'm not that anymore. I'm glad that's not who I am. I'm glad I don't live in that house anymore. I'm glad I don't have to deal with those people anymore. And we just raise that gladness level, because look how much dirty past that you have personally, recognizing that everybody's got that kind of a dirty past and we hate it, rather than joyfully recognizing, hey, you don't have to do that anymore. That's not who you are now. And that's letting go of it, to let go of that past, because that's where the baggage lies. That's the whole baggage of it, that when you're not who you thought you were, who the heck are you? Well, guess what? That's a stupid question. Who cares? What really matters is dukkha, dukkha nirodha. Is this painful or is this pleasant? Over and over again, we keep making that decision. Any painful that we see, we can make it pleasant again. And so once we learn that thoroughly out in the forest with our noble friends, the worthy ones, then we can come back and live that life cheering everyone up. And so that's all. That's the whole show. A lot of people think, in fact, they complain about what's the use of a recluse going off into the woods and never dealing with the society. The answer to that is that when he gets rid of the society in his mind, he can come back and play with the reality of the society that he used to not even know about, because the only society he ever knew was the one that he dreamt up, not knowing it. And now we can come out of the wilderness back into the real world with fresh eyes, recognizing everybody's a friend. Got no enemies here. That was a delusion that I had. I make enemies by competing with them. Most often, not only competing with them, but winning and then rubbing their face in it. And that doesn't make friends. And so, much of civilization is like that. Very territorial, very tribal, very, I don't know you, so I'm better than you are because I don't speak your language, you don't speak mine. And we get this attitude about how bad the world is, when in fact it's just an attitude that's based upon ignorance. But it takes a long time to work through that ignorance, mainly because we don't want to. We like our delusions. The story is that ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, but first it'll piss you off, and for some people it'll piss them off permanently. We already like our delusions, and our delusions are better than the actual facts in front of us. And one of the delusions, by the way, that I see a lot of Buddhists have is the delusion that comes out of both Hindu and Christianity, that there is some big truth, some ultimate truth, some gigantic truth. And if we could only see that big truth, that gigantic truth, then we would drop all of our baggage. David, you're shaking your head. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I looked at Hinduism a bit. And even in some Buddhist traditions, they make big claims, I think, about reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the big truth, the big it, the big surprise, the big satori is all we need. And that actually is magical thinking that flies in the face of there's all kinds of things that we're both ready for and can learn, and things that we're not ready for and cannot learn. And that's a wide variety of topics, just like the one that we have been talking about is the very first is that people fall out of love with the world and then they start either to fight it or try to get away from it. The lucky ones are the ones who try to get away from it, and eventually they find that they're looking not just away, but to get to something. You see the sequence in there? Where's the ultimate truth? Which one of these is the ultimate? It's got to be the first one, the very, very first one. I hate this place. That's the ultimate truth because that's going to get you started. If you don't go through that place, you're going to go nowhere. You're going to sit there and love and hate that relationship with your world and not even know anything about what's going on. But that's not the ultimate truth. No, there's more to learn than that. And so there is no ultimate truth. Maybe, in fact, there is an ultimate truth, and that ultimate truth is I don't give a flying rip about the next truth. You come to the end of it, the end of truth. I don't need any more truth. I got plenty of truth. I don't need to keep piling on more and more looking for something that's even more special than what I've got. What I've got is not special, but it's sure good enough. And so that would be the end. That's the ultimate truth, is get a load of wanting truth. Stop wanting to know the truth. You already got enough. But that doesn't sound so ultimate. That's quite deflating, in fact. Almost yucky. That's not ultimate. And in fact, it's too obvious to be ultimate. So therein lies the fallacy. No, what is the truth is what's happening in the present moment, which changes. The truth is the truth changes. It doesn't stay the same. Now, there are certain kinds of truth that we could call noble. They're not ultimate, but they're noble. Hint, hint, Buddhist and all of that. And that is the nobleness is that they persist, strongly persist. Just like the laws of nature so strongly persist that we would call them noble. But in fact, if you guys have got any chemistry background, you know that there's a whole group of chemicals that are referred to, or let us say elements that are referred to as noble. And what's the most important quality of that is? They don't mess with the other stuff. They don't get into rust. Argon stays argon. It doesn't even stay around, but never mind. The point is that a noble gas or a noble truth means that it resists and persists the changes. It's somehow above them. They're supermundane to all of the chaos. This is the distinction then between Sankara and Dhamma. And I'm referring to the little phrase you've heard of anicca, dukkha, anatta. But there is a little better phrase of that, and that is sabbe sankara anicca, sabbe sankara anatta, and sabbe dhamma anatta. Now, what that means is that even things that are noble and persist still have no self. The Four Noble Truths is not up in the air looking down upon you with a spyglass. And that is possible for some people to start looking at it like that. But it is something that persists. So the Four Noble Truths is that dukkha persists. Humans have been doing dukkha for thousands of years and will probably continue to do it, and every child that's born will be born in dukkha. And if he's really lucky, he'll come out of it because of the association with nobles. In young childhood, like the Dalai Lama, they went up in the hills and found him a young man that says, "Hey, Mama, that kid's special. We want him." And Mama said, "Yeah, you can have my kid." And so they grabbed that kid and they set him down and they taught him all kinds of good stuff. And now they call him the Dalai Lama. But they told him, or those old monks, they told Mama, he's special. But really what was the specialness is the education that he got, because he was now around monks who were worthy worthy nobles. And so he was raised with worthy nobles. That's, in fact, a tradition in both Thailand, the old tradition, and in my lifetime, I've actually seen it in Battambang in Cambodia. And the tradition is that the very, very young boys of the village become young monks, go to the monks' school, dress as little monks, live their life in the dormitory with all the other monks, having a faculty of senior monks. So it's very much like a boarding school in style, except that in Bendabat, all of the boys line up in the line that they're supposed to line up, and the senior monk then will take them to the neighborhood where their families are, so that mom and dad can see their son every day. It's a marvelous system that they've got worked out. And that's why they have that ability to train the kids and living in that kind of environment. Ajahn Po once told me that he was really lucky because he was a monk from the age of 6 and he never had to deal with women, ever. Didn't have to look at them, didn't go anywhere near them, didn't hear the sound of their voices, just complete. And not only that, but nobody around him cared about it. Not one kid in the dorm had a porn book. Not one. Nobody knew, nobody cared. I mean, talking about ignorance is bliss. And here we are all hung up because in our society we're taught that sex, that's the most important thing in life for most of your life. Right? Aren't we taught that? If you don't get it, you're not a man. All of this kind of stuff that's put into the society that we don't really need. We don't have to be taught that way, but that's how the society that we've got has worked out. And once we could see that, we could say, wait a minute, I can take that out of my mind too. If Ajahn Po can think that way, so can I. That there's no reason why. Well, let us say it this way: it would be better in Western sports if the women athletes at whatever level dressed exactly the way the men did in that particular sport, as opposed to dainty little bikini swimsuits. They probably wouldn't get near the audience, but at least it would be real sports rather than watching for the action. But our minds in the West are trained for that. We're trained to look at stuff in a certain way that we miss all the really good stuff. But the point in that regard is that, no, man, I mean, I'm looking at the good stuff. All of the beautiful arm movements and all the stuff that athletes do, I don't care enough about that at all. I only care about that crotch. That's what I care about. And so when we recognize that, we can say, wait a minute, that's unwholesome. I don't have to go around wanting something I don't have. It's better to put those kind of thoughts out and start looking at the paradise of reality that I have right here in front of me. And that's the training, is to get cleaned out of the mind of wanting things that we don't have and being satisfied with all the stuff that we really do have. Because that's the only way that we're going to be able to teach that to anybody, to help them to understand, is by being able to do it yourself. Live by example. And so we practice the way that we do. So in that way, even though you're a layman from time to time, you will be having to deal with that terrible world out there, so long as you see it as that terrible world out there. Or you can deal with that world out there with any opinion about it that you want. So let's try having a positive attitude about the world, that it's not the bucket of shit that we think it is. That Buddhism does not necessarily teach that the world is a bucket of shit. It tells you to look at what you're thinking, look at how you believe. Recognize that you're creating that. And then we can teach others that, hey, watch what you're doing. Look at what you're thinking. Wakey, wakey. Pay attention. Life's not so bad. And so that's the full circle of it. Is to first off, each one of us has to recognize that everybody does already recognize what a toilet humanity is. Now, some may be saying that, oh, the turd that I'm sitting on is good, but all them others are terrible. But every one of them is loaded down. Every one of those turds is loaded down with other people saying the same thing about the turd that I'm living on. And this is how it is that we'll reserve. It's like that in politics also. We hate every politician in that party except the one who represents us. So we basically begin to understand that we really do see the whole world through narrow blinders. We don't see it the way that other people see it. But when we recognize that there's no particular way to see the world other than the way that we want to see it, and so let's practice with that. That's one of the really great values of being able to travel and come to Thailand. It's because you were immersed in a culture, just like the best way to learn a language is by being immersed in that language, not listening to headphones from your cell phone, but rather to go and be with people. Okay, so that also applies directly with the quality of being around nobles, so that they can help you clean out and you can help them clean out. And the world's a marvelous place to be. And here's my clear example of how wonderful the world is these friends that I've got. So, I don't know whether this talk has been of much value or not. What do you think, Matt?
Well, sure, it's of value. Hopefully it gets through my thick skull at some point. Maybe it has now.
Okay, so you recognize there's a couple of steps to go, but you're on your way, man.
Yeah.
How about you, Max?
Yeah, thank you.
Anything to say?
No, not really. No.
All right. No questions or anything.
No.
David, what's going on?
Yeah, good talk. Yeah, so essentially what I've done is I've recognized the world, civilization, society, whatever, is not very supportive or healthy to cleaning out the mind. So that's what I've done is just left that, and here I am, Malaysia.
Yeah, right. And in July, which is just a few days from now, you're going to be ordaining. Give that a go. See what it's like. Maybe you've got and the likelihood is that you've got some noble Thai monks around. Pay attention. Wakey, wakey. Spend your time around them. Become friends with them.
Yeah, I see how important Sangha is and how important it is to clean up my mind. It's like this is the direction I'm going. It's like to like build Sangha and to further clean up my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how about you, Pedro? You got anything to say?
Oh well, so yes. Honestly, I've wrapped my mind some months ago about like wanting to associate with noble people and so on. For this reason, also I've joined the Sangha. At the same time, I see that when I get distracted, I get so much involved in the world. Like I plan my future for years and commit to things. And so then I get back to the Sangha and say, okay, but which direction is actually the one I want to get into? But I really saw sometimes I feel like I want to plan practical steps to getting more into Buddhism. At the same time, I feel like it's more easy for me to get involved into the world. And when I come back to the Sangha, I realized, okay, it's like I've never really moved from in practical steps from where I was. So I'm trying to understand and journal about it and meditate more. So maybe some solution comes up.
All right. Okay. In fact, Pedro is mentioning one of the points that I didn't cover very well. Kind of a detail point in the sense of that do I stay or do I go place? You can hear that in him. Okay. Do I leave or do I go? And the answer to that is that first off, a lot of people get stuck in that place and it's not comfortable and they'll stay there for years without either coming. And so, by being stuck in that, yes, I go, no, I stay, back and forth, we fail to recognize that I don't have to jump in the river completely head first. I don't have to dive in. I can stick my toe in. I can stick my foot in. I can put a little bit of the time in. That this is better the way to go anyway. That it's not always whole hog, but one of the qualities of that generally has to do with that plane ticket. That plane ticket to Thailand is a big, big step for many people. For several reasons, and not the price of the ticket, but basically the price of all of these belongings. What am I going to do with those, especially if I check out completely? This is part of the process that we go through that would be called also from the sutras position of learning to live with little. Okay, the four requisites. And we recognize that we may be carrying more baggage than we need. And I've seen some students come by with, gosh, a suitcase and two enormous backpacks, leaving much of the stuff in Thailand because he recognized that he didn't need it when he brought it. He just owned it. So he brought it. And now I don't care anymore because it was too much work to carry it around. So that's one of the points. And that question of what baggage that we have actually cannot be just physical baggage in the sense of things that have those kind of handles, but also emotional baggage, fear of the unknown and fear of what am I going to lose, like the road not taken, the Robert Frost poem, that we got to keep going down the same road, even though nobody takes that road over there. I'd like to go down it someday, but not today. And so then the next time that we think about it, going down that road again, there's that road not taken. There's that road not taken again today. I call into a Skype group, and there's that road not taken staring me in the face again. And so we recognize that, well, maybe it's not a great big yes or no giant leap, but it's something that we can play with instead. Is that not right, David? You're beginning to understand that. You can do both. You can play with both. Your microphone is muted.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can be in the world and you can retreat from the world. Yeah, play with both. Experiment.
Mm-hmm. That you don't have to go back to the village like the old monks did in the story. You can go back next month.
Mm.
You can go back and forth. The door swings both ways.
Yeah.
And we can find nobles. There's a lot of nobles in the West, too. That in fact, if you find a noble in Thailand, you can ask him, well, who do you know that's in America? Because a lot of the monks who are in America are the top quality monks from Thailand. And it's an old boys network. They know each other. And that's what I'm hoping that we can really tap into. There's an old boys club that I know exists. I was part of it so many years ago. And so tapping back into it should be very easy with the Westerners to find those nobles, those who are worthy of being around, even if you're there with a swinging door and you're there for a week and gone for a week and they're back for a month and then gone for 2 years and then back for a lifetime. It's just, you know, up to you. As long as you enjoy the process, knowing that there's this not just great big life cycle that we're talking about, but that same cycle goes around and around and around, sometimes in one's head in a day. That in fact, when we really get old and gray, that's how we do it. We do through that whole cycle every day. So in the morning, we're paying attention to the group, and in the afternoon, we're gone, out of there, nowhere to go, lost in space, you know. And so when we recognize that it's all just a game, just a cycle, just something to play with, then we can lose that fear of the unknown, saying, oh my goodness, if I make this great big jump, what if I lose? You know, back to Robert Frost and that road not taken. No, go take that road. Play with it. Yes, Matt.
What I was going to say, what made it easy for me to leave the US and Florida and Canada, all that, was the realization that if I stay in that position, I'm going to continue waking up every day, doing the same stuff over and over and over again, and being unhappy. And it got to the point where I had no choice. I had to leave.
I understand it. That's right. It's kind of like the psychological straw that broke the camel's back. Or another way of thinking of it is that over time, with your awareness waking up process, that the dukkha was here, and now your sukha is up to a level that things get kind of out of balance, and then all of a sudden, whoop, and you say, "Man, I'm out of this dukkha. I'm out of here." Okay, and that kind of happens with everybody. Eventually, we make a choice. But let's not hurry the choice. Let's make sure that it's done with wisdom so that you can weigh, okay? That in fact, as a businessman, you can appreciate the term cost benefit analysis. That's exactly what we're doing with our life. Moment by moment by moment is doing a cost benefit analysis as we can remember. And then we can say, wait a minute, that's that deal I don't want. Or, wait a minute, yeah, we'll do that one. And so that's the way that we would do it. That's the cost benefit analysis of, is this dukkha or is this worth doing? And when we get really, really excellent, we can come to the position of, it's dukkha and it's not worth doing, but I'm happy as a lark. And so that's basically the practice of that. So I give that as the gift to the day to you, Matt. This is all a cost benefit analysis, second by second by second. So anybody got any last words? Nobody? Okay. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you guys next week too.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Sure. Thank you, Dhammarato.
Bye,
Bye.
Dhammarato.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye. Thanks.
Okay. Bye-bye.